Edinburgh, north to Inverness and west to the Kyle of LOCALSH, from the crossing of the Forth to the magical island of SKYE is an outstanding rail journey. Ahead of us lie mountains and moorland, lochs and rivers, forests and glens. There can be no better introduction to the glorious Scottish countryside than to travel on the central Highlands and Kyle. Many claim it to be Britain's most scenic railway. To take the train allows a closer look at some of Scotland's greatest scenery, customs and traditions. There's plenty of time to stop along the way.
Very shortly, the first band will come on. I will guide you the names of the band that might be able to assume they say, not know where.
Our journey begins in the royal city of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, where busy Waverley Station sees the arrival of trains from all over Scotland and England.
Here in Edinburgh, the Scott Monument, representing Scotland's rich cultural heritage, is just one amongst many fine classical structures. A city which jealously guards its reputation for beauty and elegance. But Edinburgh is not simply a collection of nice buildings. A proud and distinguished nation.
From Waverley, the trains snake out to join the main line to the Scottish Highlands, and within minutes of leaving comes a thrilling ride out over the Firth of Forth. The Forth Bridge is over a century old and 1.5 miles long. With spectacular views, it carries the tracks high across the water into Fife.
In the city of Perth, they claim that no other area has such a variety of landscape and history. Built on the banks of the River Tay, world famous for its salmon fishing, Perth is rightly called the Fair City.
But Perth has reminded us too of turbulent times, for here is Balhussie Castle, home of the famous Black Watch, the Royal Highland Regiment. Formed to keep the peace in 18th century Scotland, their kilted soldiers went on to win battle honours the world over.
Scone Palace was the site of the Abbey, where Scottish kings were crowned over the legendary Stone of Scone, until Edward I stole it in 1296 and took it to Westminster Abbey. The impressive palace which stands here today was built in the 17th century, and its fine collections of porcelain, clocks and peacocks draw many visitors.
On the outskirts of the city, alongside the railway, the Dewar's Highlander stands guard outside the whiskey bottling plant. Each day, the plant can fill 350,000 bottles from 63,000 gallons of blended whiskey. As many as 40 different whiskies from distilleries all over Scotland are blended together in order to achieve that perfect balance.
Once bottled, 90% of the whiskey is packed into cases and stored in bonded warehouses, ready for export to the four corners of the earth.
Nearby, we find the Caithness glass factory, where the delicate art of the glass modeler is used to produce some of the finest crystal glass paperweights in the world. The fascinating process of heating, mixing and shaping the glass can be watched from behind safety screens.
Once the paperweights have been shaped, they're polished and imprinted with a stamp of authenticity before being packed and sold in the factory shop.
It's time to leave Perth now, and we return to the station to continue our journey.
Entering the Highlands, we arrive in the village of Dunkeld. But Dunkeld is no ordinary village. It's steeped in history, and its delightful old buildings and monuments have been preserved by the National Trust for Scotland. The steep and narrow streets hide the cathedral, whose lawns sweep down to the River Tay and Telford's seven-arched bridge. On to Pitlochry now, a stylish tourist town popularised by the writings of Queen Victoria. The River Tummel is another fine example of Scotland's many famous salmon rivers, and fishing permits are readily available.
At Pitlochry, the Hydro Board has built a power station and dam, and so as not to upset the fish, they've installed a salmon ladder, which allows the fish to bypass the dam via a series of connecting pools. Set into the ladder is an observation chamber where the fish can be seen fighting their way upstream to spawn.
In the town itself, the excitement is mounting as preparations for the annual Highland Games gets underway. The drums and pipes of ScotRail's Vale of Atholl band draw visitors to all the sights and sounds to be savoured at the games.
Since the 1850s, these games have been attracting the most renowned athletes of the day. It's footwork and muscle power that wins the prize for the shot put. The caber, which weighs 150 pounds, is tossed so that it falls as near to 12 o'clock as possible. The tug of war is another test of Scottish strength. But perhaps the most dangerous event is throwing the weight over the bar.
Playing to a different tune, but equally popular, is the Highland dancing. Leaving the games, we pass a few miles west. The Queen's view over Loch Tummel to distant Rannoch Moor is one of Scotland's best-known panoramas.
Back to Pitlochry now, to catch the train north to Blair Atholl.
From the station at Blair Atholl, a minibus awaits to offer a comfortable ride to Blair Castle, the ancient home and fortress of the Earls and Dukes of Atholl. Situated on the wide Strath of Garry, it commands a strategic position on the main route through the central Highlands.
The oldest part of the castle, the main tower, is traditionally known as Cummings Tower, and it was built in 1269. Today, Blair Castle is the home of the 10th Duke of Atholl, the only British subject permitted to retain a standing private army, the Atholl Highlanders. This privilege was granted to him by Queen Victoria. A portrait of the 10th Duke hangs on the south wall of the entrance hall amongst an impressive collection of arms, rifles, swords, crossbows, and powder horns.
The dining room was once the 16th century banqueting hall and was transformed in the 18th century into its present Baroque grandeur. In the great drawing room, the walls are hung with crimson damask, and amongst the great wealth of furniture are gilt settees and chairs over 200 years old. The wealth of detail in wooden carvings and intricate plasterwork demonstrates the skill and craftsmanship of former times.
From Blair Castle, the train sets out along Glengarry before facing a long, steep haul up to the pass of Drummochka. Dalwhinnie is only a tiny village, but at a height of over 1,000 feet, it's the highest in the Highlands.
Here, the hills soar to over 3,000 feet, all around the tiny community. The mountain water is cold, clear, and pure. So here they built a whiskey distillery. Since 1898, Dalwhinnie has been producing fine Highland malt whiskey, a drink which the old Gaelic-speaking Scots named Uskabar, the water of life. Visitors are welcome to tour the distillery and to observe all the processes involved.
Malt whiskey is made entirely from malted barley, which is crushed and mixed with warm water and then fermented. The wash, as the liquid is then called, is distilled in these two copper stills to separate the alcohol and to eliminate undesirable ingredients. There is, of course, a considerable art in determining the timing of the processes at the various stages. The spirit must remain firmly in bonds until the duty on it has been paid. The colourless spirit must now be matured in wood for at least 3 years before it can legally be described as Scotch whisky.
Both single and blended malts are on sale at the distillery shop.
Just a few miles down the valley, we come to Kinussi.
Not far from the station is the Highland Folk Museum. The museum is housed in a Georgian shooting lodge and gives an absorbing insight into the working and living conditions of the Highlanders over the centuries. Outside, there is more to see. The Highlanders' home, workshop and barn was once to be found in the Black House. Fuel was peat. Its smoky fumes must have made life inside very unpleasant indeed. Traditional crafts which supplemented the Highlanders' income are also on show at the museum. Before moving on, it's worth pausing a while to absorb some of the scenery of Speyside.
Further down the valley, we arrive in Aviemore, Scotland's premier ski resort. The scenery around here has been carved out during the Ice Age by wind, rain and sun. So today, Loch Morlich and the surrounding forest and hills form one of the most beautiful parts of the British Isles.
Above the loch tower the Cairngorms. At over 4,000 feet, they form the highest upland plateau in Britain. During the summer months, the ski lifts carry visitors all the way to the summit station.
In the valley, the terminus of the Strathspey Railway at Boat of Garten, a village which takes its name from the chain-operated ferry across the Spey, which was replaced by a bridge in 1899. The original Highland line to Inverness once ran from Aviemore through Boat of Garten to Forres on the east coast. In 1965, this section of the line was closed and the new and more direct route was found to the Northern Highlands. Now only 5 remaining miles of track are operated by the Strathspey Railway, which plans to extend the line another 7 miles to Grantown-on-Spey in the near future. The railway's main objective has been to provide a steam service for tourists, but the company has also managed to preserve the regional character of the line by restoring the existing buildings carefully and by re-erecting many distinctive Highland railway structures. The Speyside station at Aviemore was originally at Dalna-Spidle on the Highland Railway, 25 miles south of Aviemore. The footbridge came from Elgin on the Great North of Scotland Railway. The locomotive stock includes a Black 5, which operated over the ex-Highland line in 1954. But we are to travel behind number 60. An 060 saddle tank built to serve the Durham coalfields. we rejoin the main line and head for Inverness over an impressive series of viaducts. First comes the Tomatin Viaduct, which runs out over the River Findhorn, and then the Culloden Viaduct, more than a third of a mile long, with 29 arches spanning the River Nairn.
To the north lies Inverness, capital of the Highlands and the end of the first half of our journey.
Not 10 yards from the exit of the railway station is the entrance to the Station Hotel, a fine example of the hospitality provided by the railway companies who built the Highland lines.
Inverness sits astride the dark waters of the River Ness, flowing from the famous Loch Ness into the Moray Firth, and a whole series of bridges link the two halves of the city. On the east bank stands Inverness Castle, rebuilt in 1834 on the site of the original castle, which dates from 1039. The city also has many attractive places of worship. Some of the best examples are along the river. But most impressive of all is Inverness Cathedral. Built in the 19th century, the cathedral is relatively modern and doesn't compare with its more ancient sisters in the south. But it does feature some outstanding stonework. Delightful by day, Inverness is not without its nightlife. There are plenty of bars and restaurants, and Eden Court is one of Britain's best-loved theatres.
Loch Ness lies at the eastern end of the Great Glen, a massive geological fault line which links together the Moray Firth and the Atlantic Ocean. Along its length, two other lochs, which are amongst the deepest in Scotland, Loch Lochy and Loch Oig. The Caledonian Canal is an incredible feat of engineering, linking all the lochs. It gave a fast, safe passage for the sailing boats of the time.
Today, pleasure boats have the run of the canal, and motor launches set out from Inverness to cruise the length of Loch Ness. But first, they must negotiate a series of locks. With a whole day out on the loch, there's plenty of time to wonder about tales of the Loch Ness Monster. Since its first recorded sighting in the 7th century, the Loch Ness Monster has become part of the folklore of Scotland. Nessie has gained such a grip on the public's imagination that over the years there have been countless attempts to solve the mystery.
Involving at times the most scientifically advanced equipment. Despite all these investigations, no decisive evidence has ever come to light about Nessie, yet the sightings continue. Another of the main attractions of the Great Glen is Urquhart Castle. It stands on a promontory on Loch Ness, a strategically important site which commands a view of the whole glen. Built in the 14th century and one of Scotland's largest castles, it has had a turbulent history, but was finally blown up after the 1689 rebellion to prevent it from becoming a Jacobite stronghold.
Not far from Inverness is another mighty castle, Cawdor. The castle has grisly associations, for here Macbeth murdered Duncan in Shakespeare's famous Scottish play. But behind these massive walls there's warmth and comfort today, as the home of Lord and Lady Cawdor plays host to its visitors.
The cannon at the entrance is a reminder of former times, but nowadays it serves merely to whet the appetite of modern invaders.
The real treasures are to be found inside. Paintings, furniture and porcelain, an array of guns, and a fine collection of tapestries are all on display. Less extravagant but equally interesting are the original kitchens with the well and all their brass and copperware. With the tour of the house over, the castle souvenir and gift shop sells mementos of our visit.
Outside, well-tended flower beds and lawns create the perfect setting for this splendid castle.
For younger visitors, there are also animals here, including ducks and the traditional Highland cattle.
back in Inverness, and time to take a trip out west on the Kyle line, crossing the wild northern Highlands and on to the Isle of Skye.
Our first stop along the way is at Muir of Ord on the Bewley Firth. Here are the ruins of Bewley Priory, burial ground of the Lovatts, and over 750 years old.
Just a few miles north, and we arrive in Dingwall. By Highland standards, this settlement on the Cromarty Firth is a large town. Originally called Inverpeffer, the town was given its present name when the Vikings occupied it. West from Dingwall and climbing steep, the country becomes far more barren. The views are ever changing, and they're always spectacular. High over Garve, and cradled between peat and heather-clad hills, is Loch Lomond, just one of the many highlights of this glorious railway.
Observation saloons are added to some of the trains with a travel guide on board, armchair seats and a buffet service. It costs a little more, but it is indeed first-class travel.
Stations have a poetic ring about them. Achna Old, Achna Sheen, Achna Shellach, all in a row down the Kyle line. Between Achna Old and Achna Sheen, we are travelling through Strathbran, a great white glen with forests and lonely mist-clad mountains running off for miles in all directions.
Through it all run the turbulent black waters of the River Bran.
Achna Sheen, a meeting of valleys and one of the few passing places for trains on this lonely stretch of line. For those with cars, a road passes Glendochety on the way to Kinlochhew, Lochmarie and Torridon, but our way lies to the south, crossing the River Bran for the final pull up to the summit at Loip.
From here, the streams and rivers flow west, and we follow them down through Glen Carron, Loch Scaven, and its two tiny wooded islands, and on into Strathcarron and Loch Duhail in the hills of the Atterdale forest.
As Loch Carron opens up around us, we arrive on the west coast at Strom Ferry. This is the narrowest part of Loch Carron, and there are views across Aldanesken and Strom on the opposite shore.
Along the coast now are groves of rhododendrons and ancient firs. Duncraig Castle, perched on its craggy wooded setting, was once the residence of the Duchess of Somerset.
Now the train runs into Plockton, sitting snugly in the shelter of a promontory in Loch Carron. We're now in the Balmacara estate, which is the property of the National Trust, and Plockton attracts artists, photographers and yachtsmen. The sheltered harbour is a haven for fishing boats and pleasure craft, and with the warm water of the Gulf Stream, even palm trees grow here.
Still a few miles to go, though, and the views are as good as ever. The exposed crofting area of Drumbuie is a far wilder place, with the mountains of Applecross beckoning from across the water.
But the line has one more treat in store. Portnacloich cutting, 80 feet deep and hewn out of solid rock. just a short way along the coast, and the track heads into the Kyle of LOCALSH and the end of the line, with spectacular views over the water to the island of SKYE.
We've travelled over 250 miles from Edinburgh, and what better place to rest a while than the LOCALSH Hotel. With lawns right down to the sea, it dominates the waterfront. There can be few other places with views like this over breakfast.
Time to leave for the last leg of our trip now. It's only a few hundred yards across the sea to SKYE, but there's scenery to admire even on this short crossing.
Across these waters came bonny Prince Charlie, fleeing from Culloden to stay with Flora MacDonald.
As the ferry lands in SKYE, the ancient ruins of Castle Moyle look down upon the village of Caerleakin.
SKYE is rich in myth and legend, with ruined crofts and the towering Quillen Hills leading credence to many a crofter's tale. The dramatic isolation of the houses adds further colour to the scene. The black Quillins rise in a 6-mile arc, jagged against the skyline and curving right across the south of the island.
Mountaineers rightly consider these peaks to be the hardest in Britain. Normally covered in mist and always steep and rocky, they are for the experienced only. The best view of the Quillins is from Elgall. Nowhere on SKYE are you more than 6 miles from the sea, and this rugged coastline is exposed to the full force of the weather.
These treacherous shores have wrecked many a ship in ferocious storms. But whatever the weather, the magic of SKYE is never far away. Wild and beautiful, it provides a magnificent finale to an unforgettable journey.